Okay. So the proposal. First, I'm going to talk about a little bit a proposal, and then I'm going to see whether we can trace some of the effects that are similar to this proposal in the development of Scandinavian countries. So the proposal is that each country should commit to a fixed fraction of GDP to the provision of a universal basic income grant to each individual. Unconditional grant to each individual, you can think about it, but it can be in kind, it can take different forms, but for this presentation you can think about it as a cash guaranteed income to each person, but calculated as a share of the GDP. That means that it is calibrated to the income level in the country. So this proposal is together with Deborah Ray. So we have written about it in a how should I say, rather popular policy discussion magazine or net. It's actually a place on the net, but it also has a paper. It also issued on paper. It's called Ideas of India. So what we emphasize here, and I'm going to return a little bit to that, is that this proposal is country neutral in the sense that you can introduce guaranteed basic income and start small in poor countries and start higher up in richer countries if you have the same percentage, say, that go to guaranteed basic income in all countries. It doesn't have to be the same, but if you think about this as for example, as an international proposal, part of the Millennium Development, the social development goals of the UN, then you could think that all countries should commit to the same percentage, say 10%, 20%, or whatever you would like to. But in any case, you will start small in poor countries compared to richer countries. And no, there's no need for indexing. This is automatic since you have already indexed it directly. And it is you share in the prosperity of the country, and that's the thing that I'm going to talk about in this presentation. So we also claim that this will strengthen cohesion, cooperation, and coordination in the sense that these are collective incentives rather than individual incentives. Of course, these incentives are felt at a higher level than the individual level. Individual level, that's 1/n, so that wouldn't be felt at all, I guess. But it will be felt on, say, on interest organization levels, whether they are employers association, political parties, self-help groups, unions, whatever. They would feel that there are some policies that will not affect their behavior, because if there are improvement in an efficiency that shows up in the GDP, everybody will get X% of that gain, where X can be this share of the GDP that goes to everybody as a guaranteed income. It will also soften the capital labor economy in the sense that everybody, in a sense, having a share of the GDP means that you are, in a sense, a representative both for the capital owners and workers. So say that there are gains that really benefit, in the first instance, the capital owners. They will also benefit others in the sense that you will share in the gains via the sharing of the national income. It mimics sharecropping in the sense that the incentives are not perfect, but the incentives is combined with some sort of insurance. And in particular for poor countries, I think that it is important that the governments need insurance for its policies as well. So there are these insurance aspects of it. There's also insurance for everybody, of course, in the sense that you share part of your income is diversified as GDP is diversified. So you say if it's 20%, you get 20% of your income from a diversified portfolio. And of course, there are shares in the gains of globalization. Since globalization is seen as a threat to the welfare state, to normal sharing arrangement that you have. Here it is also that you get an interest as long as the globalization benefits the whole economy, this will show up in numbers for GDP, and this will be shared. Yes,
so,
Alexander.
so how are we going to collect the fraction of GDP? Wouldn't some of this?
So you can think about it. You can think about it as a tax on
tax
on everybody. You can have different. Can be different types of taxes you can have to finance this. I'm going to talk less about that than about that everybody is guaranteed an income. But of course, if it's just an income tax, then it will benefit everybody with below average income, and the cost for those involved.
And that might make it less country neutral as well, right? So in some countries, it's
Yeah.
going to be impossible to tax capital.
No, so it gives strong incentives to sort of take India. Of course, India is an example. In India, 1% of the population pay taxes. The whole agriculture doesn't pay taxes at all. For historical reasons, they don't pay taxes. Landowners don't pay taxes. Nobody in agriculture pays taxes. Of course, when you have a guaranteed scheme like this, you can't continue with this stupid arrangement that they have. So of course, this will put incentives both to broaden the tax base, to include more the informal activities, and to include into the tax base things that be exempted from. So I think this is part of it. But I think corruption is more of a problem than exactly this. So this is one way to formalize or give collective incentives to formalize more the economic activities. In most developing countries, for example, 40–50% of the economy is informal and not registered at all. There were one more hand. Yes.
Do you think this would like make different interest groups starting arguing about what to include in GDP? So you would have like rich interest groups that sort of lobbies for a very narrow definition of GDP.
I think that would be one consequence of it, and I think on average there would be much more of a stronger coalition to include more of not less. Particularly in countries where, for example, in our country we include most of the things in. We should subtract, of course, things that are destroying the nature and things like that. But except for that, we are fairly comprehensive in that respect. But in many developing countries, it's just the opposite. There's a lot of things that are included. Just as we were 100 years back, where very few people both pay taxes and have registered income. But I think you're right. This is going to be an issue. It is deliberately taught as part of the consequences that you want more social action in that direction. How to redistribute income among people? Well, first of all, the income need to be registered. Okay, so these are. So if you applaud this, since nobody was in opposition, so we agreed on this. So now we are halfway. So in most of this talk, I'm gonna say a little bit about how we. I have some loose thoughts that I wouldn't include the brush in all of that. So he may correct on that. But how universal basic share sort of complements rather than competes against the welfare state arrangement. And how it sort of can provide more collective rationality. It was part of what I just said. And I'm going to give some examples that are related to economic theory and also that I think actually happened here. Most countries have some sort of universal basic share. They can have it via welfare spending. They can have it via tax policy. I will show you a very simple expression of how I think about these things, or maybe other people have thought about it before me as we go along. But let me first. I have a claim here, and this can be controversial, but I want to do this empirically, and so any ideas or any help in this, or you can even disagree, would be extremely nice. I think that a higher and higher share of the total income in any society, and a modern society that grows, is basically a surplus that stems from arrangement that nobody owns. There can be institutions. There can just be the complementarity between Alexander is good because Bertil is so good, and Bertil is actually very good because Alexander is so good. But there's some complementarity between them, and it's there can't be an individual, at least if this is a more comprehensive group, there can't be individual property rights to these complementarities. And there's more and more complementarity. We learn from each other. We sort of stand on the shoulders of people who have been before us. And why should we claim that this is our money, our personal ownership, when it's created by interaction between individuals? It's very difficult to decompose that into individual contributions. But we have very often a justification for things that are based on sort of an individual philosophy that this is my contribution. Take a parallel to the firm. There's one of the classic justification for the role of the capitalist in any society is given by Elkin and Demsetz. It's a very good one actually. He says that he's a residual claimant of the contract because he's always, it's teamwork. The firm is based on teamwork, so he's observing it in many contexts and he's trying to give fair shares to everybody. But in order for him to have incentives to give fair shares, he has to be the central part in all negotiations, and he has to be the one who observes it and claim the residual. See, he's the residual claimant in all relationships in the firm. So thinking, yes?
No, but your point was that you couldn't really determine whether or not was which one in the group that had ownership. If you were thinking that the group has an ownership, I mean, this is so is that idea that this is owned by the group, or is it that not even the group owns it? That is for the entire humanity? Because that seems to be a lot of these basic income schemes. They seem to be very kind of oriented towards the nation state.
Yeah.
So this happens within the nation state, and so we own it together because we have shared the institutions. But your argument there should go then again having a global income scheme.
So I wouldn't be against that at all. So actually, they argued for a long time that question what is the optimal unit of redistribution? Is it the family? Is it the municipality? Is it the county? Is it the country? Is it the collection of country? Is it the EU? Is it so this goes in the same direction, or is it the world at all? And there's of course there's a practical dimension to the problem, that the distance to the knowledge about others that become longer and longer the further you go away from your own group. So this is a nation level. As the discussion here is more a compromise between these things, but I think it is just like human rights, that you claim that the national authorities, they should have responsibility for the human rights in their own country, but others have the right to criticize Sweden when they violate the human rights. And so it is also with the basic universal share. If Kenya is not paying it, and Tanzanians are seeing that they are not paying it, well, it is also Tanzanians and people inside Kenya can use that Tanzania is the main competitor of Kenya, so that they are criticizing us for not doing it. We have to, so you give motivation for social organization in that direction. But these are things, I'm just fantasy now, but that's the way I think about it. But you're right. I think globalization, since there are gains from globalization, it's not clear that we share these things individually fair across countries. So, but I also claim that a universal basic income in the form of a UBS can raise the common economic surplus. I call this first one the common economic surplus. So that you give incentives to improve institutions, to have better exploit the complementarity between groups, because now everybody get the gain of the coordination, and enhance coordination in different. So, and we think I think that this is a good scheme in the sense that the normative justification for it, if that is correct, well, if you realize it, then you will sort of expand that basis because people will be more concerned about coordination gains, about collective gains.
But you have to convince us that people in India will be more able to broaden their tax base with this justification than simply, for instance, they would all gain from better roads. They should have better roads in India, and it would improve everything.
Yeah.
So
it's more to make the incentives more explicit. That's the way I'm thinking about it. I think it's an exaggeration that Indians doesn't achieve anything. They have the most generous school feeding programs in the world. They achieved that. That was a tremendous gain when it was obtained in India. It was a lot of lobbying activities, and there were controversies on it. But they still have it today. It's very little known, but it's in operation. India has also other type of social policies that are not that bad. For example, guaranteed 100 years employment in rural areas for everybody at the minimum wage. They have also some other arrangements. So I'm thinking about it. If you get incentives for these things, that you feel it as a right, that you should have, say, 10% of GDP, I think it would stimulate a movement in the right direction. It won't be, nothing is introduced the day after it's suggested. We actually, Debraj and I went to a conference in Delhi, and we saw some of the bureaucratic reactions to it, and they will always suggest that, I think Anders was there as well, they will always suggest that there's something else we can use money for. Jeff Sachs, for example, I admire Jeff Sachs in many ways, but he thinks about these things in a different way. He thinks that there are some people, they're going to administrative all funds and give it to the most efficient way to the best purposes. This is to give money to everybody and therefore a waste. But I think it creates incentives that universalistic aspect of it actually give more to the poor than you otherwise would have. But I don't think things are easy, but I think they are possible.
No, so my only point is that what's difficult to justify is not necessarily what to give. What's difficult to justify is to tax. So and that problem is already there. So I mean, it's taxes that people are against. It's not that they lack good.
In particular, they are against taxes that they don't get much back from. So this is what I'm thinking, that they're resistant to pay taxes, at least for people below average. And you know, 80% of the income earners in India are below average. So it counts a lot whether you can convince them or create an interest in it. But India is trying out some basic guaranteed income schemes, so they are not so hostile to the idea that maybe to implement it at the state level is more feasible and more likely than to implement it on the country level immediately. Okay. Yes, Lasse?
Can you clarify what you compare this to? Is it having a universal basic share versus having a universal basic income, or is it having universal basic share versus spending the money on other things, or is it versus lower taxes?
So it's universal basic share versus status quo. That's how it is today.
But the way to be financed, I think it's from many questions. Is it will it be financed through taxation or through reductions in other government?
So that would be part of the political struggle, of course. I think that's for all basic income guarantees proposals. I think they suggest too many things. If you're going to suggest something for a certain social policy, I don't think it's the point to say exactly what's the best way to finance the taxes, or should you cut something else, or should you just expand taxes? I think that is up to the political competition to decide. And at least I wouldn't have a clear point on that. But for sure, in a country like India, you should extend the tax base. That I think everybody agrees on that. To take the main sector in India to have tax exemption for that, I think it's just ridiculous. And it goes back to the power under independence. That they claim that agriculture should never be taxed. So that's it. I think the way it operates will depend on the question you raise. But I think what I'm going to say today will have implications in the same direction, no matter how it's financed. At least for a majority of the voters, as long income taxes will be the least favorable tax for them, with a constant market tax rate. But then everybody below average would have an incentive to like the scheme. So this is the way I think about it. Okay, so this is the claim. Can I give just one example of it is a bit exaggerated. Some of you have heard it before, and the numbers are taken from Moer also. But just to have an idea about how I think about what is common income. So he says once that compare Haiti and Germany. Germany per capita income is 10 times as high as Haiti income per capita. And we know that Haiti is not working quite well at all. Germany is. So what is due to institutions? What is due to sort of individual capabilities that are different? Well, then let me say it's my examples. I wouldn't drag Moer also into it, but the numbers are from him. So compare now a German or a typical German and a typical Haitian. They go to US, and they run their own businesses in US. Then the difference between them, there are numbers for that, are 2 to 1. The Germans are twice as efficient in the market sense than a guy from Haiti. And you just take these numbers by the face value. So that explains that we're going to go from 1 to 10. This goes from 1 to 2 when they compete on a similar basis. Well, if you take these things by the face value as I suggest, then what is due to coordination, complementarity, institutions, that Germany has better institutions and a lot of other things, that is 80%. 20% is explained by marketable differences between Germans and people from Haiti. The rest, since they are 10 times as rich per capita, then 80% must be common income. This is an exaggeration, I think. And there are many things you can criticize the example from, but give it a feeling for what we are talking about. And that the difference between Haitians and Germans are basically institutional differences. There are not differences in a very much deeper sense to individuals. And this, of course, we can do. So this is the type of calculation, or some type of calculation we can do to justify or to indicate what are the common income in society. And my guess is that in most cases, most comparisons that you can do, when you compare a country that doesn't work that well with a country, Germany or whatever country it may be in Europe, you will find that there are huge differences, at least 50%. That stems from institutions, coordination, things like that are not easily, that you can not easily justify property rights for, but the people argue as if these things are their own. It's a taxpayer's income. It is that you have really property rights to these things, while they are in nature such a thing that you can't have property rights. They're just like the rent in agriculture. When people say this is my rent in agriculture, and the old philosophical debate in, as you know, go back to 1790s and so on, that was a gift from God, and it should be given to everybody. So therefore, that was the justification of Thomas Paine and everybody for something that is similar to a guaranteed basic income that was debated just after the French Revolution and inspired many people and a controversy at that time. And after that, it was forgotten for many years, and it turned up after the Second World War, both on the left and on the right side in politics, arguing that a sort of guaranteed basic income was a good idea. And one justification is, I claim, that more and more of the income actually are income that is collectively created, and you can't give it individually out. It's more reasonable to give an equal share to everybody. Okay, what was Scandinavia? Well, we have no explicit UBS, but we have, when do we stop?
We stop 20 past the hour.
So 5 minutes more?
Yeah.
So then I just summarize some things that I have, and I will show you that I have done some math homework. So, so here, so do we have something that's very similar to a universal basic share? Yeah, and that many people have seen this before. Maybe I was the last one to see it, but here's one way to think about it. Think about the taxes of income. Your income is W, and your disposable income is C. So, and the tax is the state budget. There's just a constant tax rate for the example here, and the tax base is X. So now fix B, fix the budget B for the sake of the argument. Then of course any increase in X would imply a lowering of the taxes. Whether it actually is lowered, that's not the point. But an expansion of X means that you can afford to do more. Of course, if you have collective, I just do the calculations here, that by an expansion in the tax base of delta X divided by X, that means by a certain percentage. If you multiply that by T, then you get the expansion in the disposable income relative to your income. If you divide on 1 minus T on both sides, you get the expansion in disposable income, the percentage increase. That will be T over 1 minus T multiplied by the expansion in the tax base, what you are producing. Of course, when you have collective organizations, you would think about these things. But you have a big employers association, of course, they would think about this, that the taxes that are levied on people will be lower if the tax base is higher. We can afford more things. You can have unions thinking about these things. And actually, as you know, this was part of the debate in the 70s. So we had these Kleppepakker, these packages of tax packages and benefits packages, where you said to the unions, well, this, if you moderate your wages, we reduce taxes and so and so. And the justification of that was, of course, that they thought that lower wages, in particular, would mean in particular high employment in traded goods industries. So there was more to be shared, and you expanded the tax base. So this was the justification for it. So the people that thought about it, I think it had been operating in a way like this, that big unions, they would internalize, for example, also other interest organizations, that if we share more in the coordination, so we expand X, then you will have a higher, you will have more in disposable income. Whether you use that for welfare state expansion or some other policies, that's not the issue here, but just that in high tax societies, then the implicit UBS is actually there. Yeah. Let me just say what I have done, and then I stop. Are you paying attention?
Sure.
So I just say that I will give examples, and you will see that there are some math going along with this. And if you bribe me, I can show you this in a break, unless you have to take it for granted. First of all, I would say that this kind of basic universal share, implicit or explicit, that gives the cost of conflict is much more visible to any group in society. It's much more costly. It's equally costly as before, but now it's quite clear that all groups will share in the cost of the conflict. And that means that you get less conflict when you have a universal basic share, if there are any calculations of benefit versus benefit versus cost for organizations that are involved in this. I have something about that. I mean, one of the basic discussions in our part of the world was the conflict over the bargaining system, wage bargaining system in itself. And as everybody here know, but I just remind you, there was a tremendous change when you coordinated wage setting when it came to conflicts. Almost a stop of conflict compared to the interwar period after Second World War. Many reasons for this. One reason I claim is that everybody felt there was a share that would be lost to everybody because of the system if they had a conflict. The same in Sweden. There's a little bit more wildcat strikes in the 80s in Germany, in Sweden. There also is always something wrong with Swedes, so we shouldn't take that. I'm kidding. That was basically by unorganized workers against the will of the LO in Sweden. So you can also see it in the number of strikes. Norway and Sweden had the world record in strikes and lockouts between the wars, and the world record in the absence of strikes and lockouts after the war. In the same length of period, that's down to 1/10 of the cost of conflict in between the wars and after the war. I will claim, and I don't show you anything on this, that in particular, universal basic share helps in coordinating between factors in production that are complements. Factors in production that are substitutes, they very often organize themselves. Because if you and I have an interest organization, you have yours and I have mine, and we compete against each other, it will be very important for us to increase our bargaining power to coordinate. Complements is different, because complements, when they coordinate, they moderate each other. Because the cost of my wage increase to Bertil's activities is more costly if we have complements. That means that I also hurt his employment, not only mine. So the difficult in any society is to coordinate complements. And we claim that this gives particular incentives to coordinate between complements. And complements is always, when you sort of expand beyond one sector and coordinate across sectors, there are very often complements in production, because they react to they are inputting in each other's industries and so on. So that's the first claim, and there is some math that goes along with this. I guess Alexander, at least he takes this immediately, and there's also another example of this, so I do that. It's also a coordination of efficiency wages of employer. Employers can also gain.
Kalle?
Yes, 2 minutes.
No, not more.
1.5. We always take the average. So the employers' efficiency wages they have a wrong word, because there's some basic inefficiency in efficiency wages, in the sense that you can gain by coordination. Efficiency wages, most of the mechanisms are based on a mechanism. Most of the mechanisms are based on the principle of beating the average, but that means that you easily create too high unemployment in efficiency wage settings. Easily to demonstrate, there is some math going along with this. UBS will sort of internalize part of this, that you will internalize some of the losses by that you I take away this. There's also, and I stop by doing this, there are also examples from universal basic share, in the sense that you both coordinate, or you get incentives to coordinate. You also create the conditions for a higher demand for things that are complementary to for example, health services, schooling, because you get more of the gains also of that. As you can hear from the tone of the presentation, I'm exaggerating some of these things, but I think that they are there, and the aim of the project, if we get along, is to quantify more of this and make the justification of that these can be gains that you can easily reap more of, not completely, by having a sharing system built in that is sort of supervised across countries, just like human rights are supervised across countries. Nobody is really the governmental agency for the world as a total, but you supervise that everybody follow this rule. And since, if I'm right, so much of the income is generated by complementarities and coordination, then it should also be reflected in the way we share the income, and to give more incentives for more coordination and complementaries. Okay?